movie Conclave gets a lot of hate for a variety of reasons, and quite frankly, a lot of the criticisms are valid. Now, the writer's Wikipedia page isn't too in-depth, so I don't know his background exactly, but from his script it seems very strongly that he is not really all that familiar with the Roman Catholic Church. But this is not a video discussing the various problems with this film, as it's like literally hundreds of those videos already exist. So I want to briefly acknowledge that it is a very flawed movie. There's plenty of people pretending it isn't, but it is silly to deny that. But from here on I am gonna praise it. I do think it is ultimately a great movie. In fact, I wish it were better, precisely because it is so great. Now, this is a movie that exists in the context of the wider gender conversation. You have to understand that discussion about gender is like the main thing going on in Christianity right now. Where you stand on a variety of gender-related issues has become literally the primary determiner of orthodoxy and heterodoxy. Nowadays, denying the divinity of Christ and denying that he lives, that, obviously not in theory but in practice, is a mere theological opinion. A theological opinion found often only implicitly, but or sometimes even plainly, among perfectly Christian Christians. But female priests and queer affirmation are seen as peak heresy, a mockery of the Christian faith. Like me, Conclave joins this conversation on the side of woke. So it is regarded as a mockery of the Christian faith. For the most part, the film is actually barely woke, however. The odd woke comment appears, but it only truly joins the gender conversation in the climax, when it is revealed that Vincent Benitez, now Pope Innocent, is actually intersex. You could say the movie says little, yet I think if it said more, it would have been less effective in conveying its message. You see, normally people say LGBT, and maybe sometimes you get a special extended edition which includes the I for intersex. But I say that in the context of having this conversation, not the vanilla queers, the L and the G, but the I is the best place to start. The power of intersex people is that it's actually quite hard to be against intersex people. Whereas things like homosexuality and transitioning as a trans person can be seen as active choices, being intersex is, no matter how close-minded you are, clearly not a choice, but just something strange about your body. It's a physical reality. And yet, intersex issues overlap very strongly with many of the common woke issues. Take, for example, the conversation around public toilets. What applies to trans people applies to intersex people also. In fact, if you do manage to notice anything abnormal about an intersex person, you may well assume that what they are is trans, and so they too will be vilified in the same way as trans people. Perhaps, for example, chased out of a restroom. Ironically, if there were a serious opposer of intersex people, they would require of them the opposite of what they would require of trans people, namely that they do get medical intervention to fix what is wrong with their body. This way they must either affirm that androgyny is acceptable, or capitulate that gender-related surgeries might not necessarily be wrong in every conceivable case. And what about their potential sex lives? Wouldn't any sexual activity always be at least half gay? Being intersex is inevitably a gay-adjacent thing. But whereas gay people can be prayed over in the hopes that they may be redeemed from their homosexual inclinations, intersex people can only be either half gay or celibate. But Saint Paul, obviously, advises the Corinthians not to abstain from marriage so as to avoid sexual immorality. And through the ages, the apostolic way has not been to require total sexual abstinence from believers. Female priests are another thing that also relates to intersex people. The freshly vestured Pope Innocent says that upon discovering that he was intersex, he felt like he had been living in sin. Obviously, because you must be a man to be ordained a priest. All sacraments performed by him have been invalid all this time, if you take a rigorous view. Except baptism, of course, because that sort of works differently. But like, countless invalid Eucharists, all because of misleading genitals. Then why has God restricted the priesthood in this manner, if such a grave thing would become the consequence? The inevitable truth is that countless intersex priests must have, in fact, existed. People who, just like the character in Conclave, likely didn't even know they were different. All shepherding flocks invalidly. It's statistically inevitable. Even an intersex pope is very conceivable. It can have happened. You must therefore believe that either a bunch of people got dealt a really mean hand, or that perhaps priestly ordination is actually a little more nuanced of a thing. Perhaps then, for example, a priestly ordination of a non-male is only illicit, but not invalid. I think if someone were to come to that conclusion, that would definitely be a huge leap forward in ecumenical relations between woke and non-woke churches. So I think the understanding and acceptance of intersex people is a great place to start if you want to have these conversations fruitfully. And I must say, these conversations are quite often had in ways that cannot possibly bear fruit, because people are dumb and rhetorically inept. If you feel called to rebuke me, feel free to post your proof text in the comments, for example. Perhaps to humor you, I will pretend I've never seen those verses before, though obviously I would rather see you find a coherent way to deal with the questions I raised.